Thank you very much, Majid. Many thanks for your presentation. Win-win is the kind of behavior that I encourage not only in construction, but in all aspects of life. And I think the secret ingredient to a win-win is fairness, just being fair to the other party or parties. We're now moving to our last CPD presentation, which I'm gonna present for you. And it's, I think it'll pop on the screen shortly. It's about collaborative mindsets or behaviors in the pursuit of value. This is something I'm very passionate about because I think technology is important. I think the standards are important. I think a lot of things are important in construction, but I believe we're still struggling with the mindset. I think you know who I am at this stage. I work for a small division of KEO. These are the type of projects that I do, and this session is offered to you by the Chartered Institute of Building, for which I volunteer. I'm a member of their Dubai hub, and also a member of their business development board in the UK. Now, I'm not going to go through the definitions before. I promise you'll have lunch before 2:30. I think it'll be only 10 minutes, but the bar at the bottom, the yellow bar, which you can't see there. No, you can see it. I think it's only on the left screen. It shows the progress. So the closer we are to the right side of the screen, the closer we are to lunch. So I'm not going to cover these because they've been covered so many times. It's just the intention of the value engineering process is to maintain the client expectations. There's a number of publications over the years. We started in 1934, and the recent ones in 2016 by Farmer, one that is called Modernize or Die, that still didn't provide the right incentives to the industry to modernize or die. I know my wife smokes, and on all cigarette packs it says, if you smoke, you'll die, but she's not impressed with that. She keeps smoking. I think we need just a different mindset for the industry to change from within. O'Neill, another book recently launched, he went to 17 contributors from academia, from construction, and he talked about success in construction. We are starting to see a lot of changes, and maybe because of BIM, maybe because of this CPD that we spoke about earlier. But I wanted to show you a comment done by the CEO of the CIOB on this book called Global Construction Success, released this year. I didn't buy it yet. I'm just waiting for Amazon to give me a cheaper version. Maybe a used one, I don't mind, or maybe I'll take an e-version of the book. The underlying text says the contributors show the best and worst behaviors that give the industry its extremes of reward and frustration. And I think we're all in tune with what Chris is saying here. The wrong behaviors take the ordinary and produce the mediocre by replicating or repeating mistakes and not learning from them. We spoke about lessons learned earlier. And although this is a topic that appears with all professional bodies, the PMI, the RICS, the CIOB, the ICE, nobody really does lessons learned. And in the Middle East, there's a big hire and fire approach to employees, or employees moving from a company to another quite quickly. And there's a lot of lessons which they learn, but they're not staying with the practice that they worked with and they got paid from. So I think lessons learned is something we need to focus more on. I'm not going to cover the main actors in the supply chain, but again, IPD, the approach I support, talks about bringing all of these guys together to deliver better assets, not only in terms of CapEx, but also in terms of OpEx, which I think is the most important aspect when we talk about buildings that will be there for, I don't know, 60 to 100 years maybe. Now, these are my takeaways for you for today. I prepared this presentation way before the summit, so there may be things that repeat, but I just want you to think quickly about contracts and the current approach. We have lawyers and cost managers, contract managers preparing contracts which are sometimes too onerous. And those onerous contracts, they cost the clients money. Maybe they don't need those clauses in there. Maybe they're not fair to the contractors or to the designers or anyone involved in the supply chain. They do encourage a unilateral effort. They don't allow the team to work together as an integrated one. There's no risk sharing, as opposed to IPD, where you also share the pains and the gains. So what I'm pushing for is more fairness across the supply chain in the industry. I want to encourage, foster, and promote this collaboration that we talked about. Each panel reiterated the need for collaboration. And also, I'm thinking, when I think of value engineering, I think people should be enthusiastic enough to be able to do value engineering. Maybe they would be incentivized through their contracts to do value engineering, but value engineering is an aspect that you can get away with even by not doing it or not doing it properly, because there's no metrics that, or a tick sheet that will say, yeah, you've done it or you didn't do it. So you can easily claim for it. So coming back to the staff contracts, what I noticed in the GCC and also in the UK, my cousin came here, she visited about 2 weeks ago, and she tells me the contracts are not fair. Even in the UK, I'm sure you've all come across clauses in staff contracts which say, due to the seniority of this position, you are required to work whatever hours to make those deliverables happen and go to the clients. And I think that's a bit wrong. There may be a problem with your efficiency as an employee, or there may be a problem with the company, which maybe asks you to do a lot of work and they expect you to spend day and night in the office. And I don't encourage that. Working hours, days, overtime, I'm not sure how many companies, I don't want to do a hand raise exercise because I don't want to see the results, how many companies are still doing, they're still paying overtime. And the other problem, which is more recent now, is availability. Some of the stuff may be in your response to the RFP if you're a client, but you realize that some of them are working in Saudi for PIF now, or they're working on another building project or a project in Oman or Kuwait and so on. Now, moving into speaking of mindsets, because this is the main topic, what we're doing every day, I'm sure most of us do it, whether we want it or not, is to spend a lot of time on preparing these backup emails and WhatsApp messages. Let's just cover our assets, just to be polite. And that type of behavior is just adding time, and it's not making us more efficient. It's just preparing us for a dispute. We postpone decisions, and we try to avoid responsibility, which is something, again, I don't agree with when it comes to payments. But we'll talk about payments. I think payments should be done on time. People did their work. They delivered something physical or a design and so on. They need to be paid on time. And also the outdated processes, tools, and techniques. What if we shift the focus on the delivery and just focus on delivering, say, a design or a building, constructing it, as opposed to spending so much time with these backup emails and WhatsApp messages just to cover ourselves. Again, IPD, share risks and rewards. Collaborative decision-making, collaborative innovation, they can all be done in an IPD environment. Speaking about procurement, we had an interesting panel on design and build. We had another one on PPPs, and I think this was a research done recently, about 2 years ago, by the RICS, and they said the most prevalent in the Middle East is still the design bid build, or the traditional approach. Unfortunately for us, we live in an era, this is worldwide, because of the global squeeze where the cost is king. Contracts are drafted in a way that there's a lot of problems for contractors who are late or designers who are late with their deliverables. We've got penalties. We don't talk about liquidated damages. We speak about penalties here. There's no limit. As long as a contractor signed on a penalty, it doesn't matter how high it is per day. Of course, there may be a cap, but nobody looks into how realistic that penalty is. If you don't deliver a hotel in the given timeline, because maybe that timeline is not realistic, then you'll pay per day more than the company would make by I don't know, renting all of the rooms. There's no incentive for quality, and I think this is where, again, we need to change. What if we shift this focus from cost and time to the quality? Of course, some projects, Expo 2020, FIFA 2022, we can't move that because they're fixed in time, so time is important. But let's look after the quality and what we're left with after an asset is delivered. We can also investigate other models, maybe DMB, maybe design, build, operate, and maintain, because these types of contracts, some of them also work with PPPs, they do encourage the supply chain to provide good quality because they will operate the assets. And if they have a bad product that they need to operate for 20, 50 years, 100 years, if it's a road network, then they'll struggle with that because they'll lose a lot of money. For tendering, what the current approach is that we're just letting the lowest tender, lowest bidder get the work. And again, I don't think that's fair. There's a number of problems in the UK that were reported over the beginning of the year, first quarter of this year. Fit-out specialists, it was JLL who were the whistleblowers, and they realized that a number of fit-out specialists who were having most of the market share, they colluded and they arranged tenders in a way that each of them was favored at one stage. They also cover costing or cover tendering is a big problem, because if you don't want a project, just say you don't want it. Don't just go 10 times the cost so the client will say I don't want it, because if everybody does that, then the clients end up paying enormous amounts of money. If you don't want to get involved on a project, design, operation, construction, anything, just say from the beginning, I don't want to be part of this because I'm very busy at the moment, or give a reason. Because of this, there's numerous claims and disputes, because contractors not only are trying to cut corners when they're going in very cheap, but they're also trying to work with any potential claim that they can use to increase their margin, which is anyway quite low at the moment. The intent is to shift this focus from the cost to the capability and the technical aspects. What we've done in the recent 6 months is we've awarded a project in Abu Dhabi. It was one of the contractors that was on the panels that got it. And they were the second cheapest, not the cheapest. And for another project here in Dubai, a residential project, we're recommending the 5th cheapest, because we believe the first 4, they didn't look at the design information properly. And again, it's a recommendation. The clients, again, they have the final call and they will say, no, I want to go with the cheapest. That's up to them. But our recommendation was go for the 4th or 5th cheapest. In terms of payments, this is the big problem now. And I hear of many companies who are struggling with salaries because they're not getting paid by their clients. And the approach is, we will pay you, but maybe we'll not pay you. Maybe we're hoping that you get out of business and then we don't need to pay you anymore. This is across the world. It's not necessarily here, but we see it around the world. We see a lot of clauses in contracts, pay when paid or paid if paid, which, again, from the beginning, for me, is like a prenup agreement where you don't even get together for a long time. You're already thinking about how you will split, or you have a backup clause in your contract which says, if your client is not paying you and I'm your subconsultant, you will not pay me. Well, I don't think this is fair. If you have a good relationship with a subconsultant, you need to pay them irrespective of getting the money or not from your client. That should be on you. A lot of problems with Carillion. You know this from the UK. About 3,000 companies went out of business because of them by the end of last year, and other black swan events. What we're suggesting now is an instrument called supply chain finance, which is usually initiated by a client. Instead of having a relationship, a direct relationship between the client and the contractor, we would have another third party, which usually is a bank because they do supply chain finance or reverse factoring. And once an invoice is approved by the client or the engineer, the supply chain finance company, the third party, the bank gets it, and you as a supplier have an option to get paid before the deadline that you had in the contract in exchange of a small fee, or be paid on time. And the same way with the client, they can pay the supply chain finance mechanism or the bank later, again in exchange of a fee or of an interest rate. I'm in discussions with some Sharia-compliant SCFs for MENA region, but we're making very slow progress. I'm hoping next time we meet in another event, I'll be able to tell you more. I think the SCF supply chain finance can work best with financial technologies and with blockchain technologies. And I think this having a guarantee that you'll get paid on time as a supply chain actor will encourage you to do more VE. Just because you're confident that you'll get paid on time, you'll be able to pay your staff on time. I was speaking to a lady who has a company here, and she said about 2 years ago she had to sell her apartment, which she bought in Dubai, just to pay staff salaries because she couldn't sleep at night, not being able to pay them. In terms of quality, again, we're not focusing on quality as an industry now. The CIRB are launching an initiative. They've launched it recently to focus on quality because we've seen so many problems with projects. Time is secondary, again, if it's not as important as Expo 2020 or FIFA 22 or programs and projects which are fixed in time. Yeah, the current approach is whatever will be, and hopefully it will not rain in the building, but the problem is it kind of rains in a lot of buildings when we get rain in the GCC. What if we reevaluate the procurement models to incentivize quality? We mentioned PPP earlier, we mentioned design, build, operate approaches, and again, move away from low tender awards, unless they're, they're also technical and commercially they're the best, then go with them, but otherwise don't just focus on cost. And we need to request and provide reasonable time and skill. The problem we have is we're given a set of information or some brief to produce a design or produce a report or construct a building in an unrealistic timeline. And we need to raise the flag when we see that and say, look, this is not possible, or we will try to do it, but these are the risks, and maybe we will charge you more if we're a contractor, because it's an added risk to us committing to deliver in what we think is not reasonable. These are some examples of problems, recent problems. A high-end residential tower in Australia, delivered in August last year. Very expensive apartments around Christmas time last year. People inside the apartments, tenants and people who own them, they started hearing cracks, and there's nothing worse than that. I've been in an earthquake, but that was small. These were like real loud cracks, and people had to be evacuated. This is again because we're pushing the contractors to cut corners as opposed to giving them the right time and not squeezing them too much on cost, letting them do the work properly. Bridges in Italy, again, big problems there. London with Grenfell Tower, again, I don't want to go into them too much. Technology, we spoke about it earlier, and it's still a low uptake in terms of modern processes, tools, and techniques. The waste levels on site are shameful. I've been to sites where we pre-qualify contractors, and I visited sites which were very organized, very neatly done, and I've been to other sites where it was chaos. And this also comes back to the health, safety, and environment aspects, because if you have a site done properly, the risk of accidents is less. You're also helping the environment. There's still a lot of focus on 2D analog design, 2D drawings. And this is what I usually promote. I say work smarter, not harder. Try to automate as much as you can. And some things can be automated just by, again, many people mentioned it. Take a step back and look at what you're doing. I've been to Carrefour last week, and I was trying to use these punching machines where you just scan your products. And I was moving some big, like 6 pieces of water, those kind of water bottles, and I was trying to scan each of them. And then my wife told me, no, you can just press plus, plus, plus. You just scan it once, even if you buy 6 of them, you don't need to lift them all the time. So if you have time and you have the patience to take a step back and reevaluate what you're doing, most probably you'll find a better way to do it, smarter way to do it. We need to produce a virtual equivalent of the asset to be built, and we need to analyze it, to simulate a lot with it, to make sure that we can predict operational costs better, and play with these scenarios with the MEP. Now, touching on what Majid said earlier, I think the future for many professionals in construction is relating to MEP installations and smart systems that assist those MEP installations, and maybe buildings that will think for themselves. They'll be able to take decisions based on if-then scenarios. So there are things to think about: big data, 3D BIM, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, 3D printing, and so on. All these presentations will be made available, so don't worry if you didn't take the chance to take photos. For value engineering, that's the reason we're here today. The current approach is to have an unrealistic budget or an over-design when we start performing cost cutting. I don't want to go back into that again. There's a focus on capital expenditure, but not an operational one. And facilities managers are not involved. They're not even consulted in the early days. And the idea is to get these entities involved in the early days so you can get feedback. Otherwise, they end up with an asset that they don't like. Nathan mentioned earlier, the doctor just in a 3D environment, just checking his room there and saying, oh, this is not what I want. I want this moved in that corner, this moved in that corner, and so on. The V should be a continuous and collaborative effort. Again, we're still looking at mechanisms to do that happen, because we get one line in the RFP saying you need to do VE. If you do it or not, it doesn't matter, because your fees are more related to the other deliverables that you produce, not necessarily VE. If you give them 2 options or 20 options, they'll still say it's done for both cases. The involvement of key participants and the early goal definition is again essential. And part of VE is also facilitation, which takes quite a lot of time on different projects, maybe a 30-day exercise split in a number of workshops, a number of client meetings, a number of design team meetings with the PM, the QS, the designers, and so on. Asset managers we spoke about. Life cycle costs and whole life cycling, it's an important topic. We're slowly starting to move into it. We need to shift this focus onto operations. We do get RFPs, designers get RFPs, please design to cost. The cost is 3,000 per square meter for a residential building. And that's quite challenging. And the problem is, if you deliver a project for 3,000 a square meter, a residential project, the amount you spend for operating it is going to be quite high. And again, I'd like to see in the future, the same way we have benchmark for hotel, for apartments, how much per square meter or ranges, I'd like to see ranges for how much the operational expenditure costs. Because the building I live in, they have a higher operational cost or maintenance cost. I think it's about 25 a square foot. But again, I don't think that was tested before. That's just reactive. How much we spend, okay, we put an overhead on it, and it's 25. That's not the way to do it. Let's do it proactively from the beginning. Design, this is a big issue. If we under-design, then we go to the municipalities, Dubai municipality, DCCA, and they say, no, your design is not okay, go back to your desk and add more reinforcement. What happens if you add too much reinforcement and the client ends up paying for something that they will never use? Because the frame is the frame. If it's robust enough to hold the live loads and the furniture, whatever you put in those hotels or apartments, then it's enough. We don't need to over-design. And it's quite difficult to do that unless you go back to benchmarks and say, look, the buildings we've done so far, they had a 180 kilograms per square meter for beams, but your one has 300 per cubic meter of concrete. So there's something wrong in there. Again, you raise the flag proactively and say, let's look into it again. Maybe there's ways we can refine this and make it more efficient. I do encourage you to go to these professional bodies. Maybe they're not all related to what you do, but I think professional bodies, they push the industry together with education, with schools, and this is another thing I would recommend you to do as part of your continuous professional development, is to look at maybe masters, another masters, bachelors, MBAs, PhDs, and so on. It's very important to attend an event like this or other events where you share information, especially when it's free. You get food, you get to meet a lot of amazing people. Why not? There's no excuses. 2:30, we'll have the food. We'll have a big lunch, 5-star lunch. I'm not sure if it's a lunch, but it's good. Okay, I'm looking at the yellow thing at the bottom. So on behalf of the CIB, I'd like to thank you for attending this presentation. And now I'm swiftly moving, I've got 5 minutes, but I only used 2 for the closing remarks. We've had some inspiring keynote presentation today. It was followed by 3 interesting panels and 5 presentations, and they all discussed the importance of value engineering in the built environment. To end this session, we would like to invite you to complete the feedback form and tell us how we performed today. So if we didn't perform very well, at least we know it for the future, we can improve. And just for you to know, there's some other events done by CPI Trade Media in the remainder of the year. We've got Women in Construction Summit. This is open to both males and females, and I encourage you to register for it. It's on the 1st of May. We've got the Retail Hospitality Construction Summit on the 30th of September. Then 1 month later, we've got the Middle East BIM Summit, the 4th edition. Got the Big Project Middle East Awards, the 9th edition. Then the Middle East Consultant Awards, the 4th edition in 10th of December. And on the 12th of December, we have the Contractors versus the Consultants Golf Day. Now, on behalf of the organizers and sponsors, we would like to thank you for being here today, and we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy diaries to be here today, and we certainly hope to see you at the next summit in 2020. We hope you have enjoyed spending time with us, and we invite you all for lunch, which will be served in the restaurant. I think it's upstairs. Enjoy the lunch, have an amazing rest of the day, and make sure you don't go to work, because that may not be good for you. Thank you very much. Thank you.